So many, many years ago, I started coming to the Abbey, and at some point, Venerable Chodron had me start reading and transcribing stories from inmates. And I did this for a while. I mean, I was transcribing many, many of them. And then she said, well, this is actually going to be part of a book. Um, and you can, try to help kind of arrange the topics and put these stories in it. So I was just very inspired that this was going to be something that was going to be beneficial for inmates. And many, many years later, this book came out, Unlocking Your Potential, How to Get Out of Your Own Way. And so it's quite meaningful for me, actually. So how this started was Venerable Chodron was writing and corresponding with an inmate in Washington State, Calvin Malone. And they were discussing the Dharma, and she would give, she'd also led groups at prisons and would lead discussion groups. And so there were these discussion questions that she would send to Calvin. And Calvin had this idea, what if we put all of this together in a book? So stories that he wrote, stories that other inmates had written, and then Venerable Chodron's discussion questions. And so all of that came together. I think it was published in 2019. And the Abbey prison program has been using it. And we've been sending it to inmates often as their first kind of encounter with the Dharma, to really explore their past, their perceptions, their thoughts, and also their current situation, to see, what kind of changes would they want to make, so they really can understand their potential, but then figure out what they need to get rid of, right? So I wanted to start with part of the introduction, where it says, we're all engaged in the process of change, but what is it that we're trying to change into? Granted, the vast majority of us want us to change for the better, yet we repeatedly get stuck along the way. We get caught up in our thoughts, emotions, and judgments and allow negative influences to prevail. What all of us really want is to be happy and avoid suffering. Where we run into problems is the ways we go about accomplishing this. So I think this is very true, not just for inmates, but of course for all of us. So just to give a brief kind of summary of the book, it basically goes from where the person is now to where they want to be, or where we want to be. So it starts off with understanding your internal life. So thinking about, what are those emotions that you have? What are the positive ones, the negative ones? Are you generally happy or not? Then there's a really long chapter about stinkin' thinkin'. So this is based on, I think, a course that prisons have where they go through all of these what's called thinking errors. And so some of them are black and white thinking, exaggerating, minimalizing, overgeneralizing, can't stand it, fact versus feeling, labeling, filtering, it goes on. So all of these things that just get in our way and are not beneficial. And then understanding your mistakes. So figuring out why we do what we do, learning how to forgive, and also there's something that was created, the negative behavior cycle. And so this is, how people get caught up in these behaviors, these addictions, negative behaviors that are harmful, but how it's so difficult to get out. Then living with open eyes and an open heart. So this is where we really get into the positive aspects, what we want to generate in our heart and mind. And then how we enact that. So beneficial actions is the last chapter. So It's currently being used by a prison in West Virginia. So I had an inmate write to the Abbey who said he was very interested in getting a group started. And so his chaplain was very supportive, and they allowed that group to start. So that's currently underway. There's been an inmate in Florida and also one in Texas who are trying to get groups started based on this book. So it's really exciting to see how just from this conversation that Venerable Children had with Calvin, how it can blossom and really inspire and encourage all of these other inmates. And we have many, many copies that we're sending. So it's just wonderful to see this book spread and make a difference. But the real purpose of this BBC today is I want to share the story of Daniel. He is an inmate who recently sent us a letter responding to the first 3 questions of this book. And it really struck me for many reasons. So I want to explore that and share his story, because I think it's really helpful to learn and to see how people can change and how complex people are. So the first question is, what are your aspirations for yourself? Enlightenment in this lifetime. Get out of prison, stay out of prison, earn college degrees, learn a trade, become a paramedic, master yoga and jujitsu, and become a better person as a continuous, eternal process. The last part really caught me. He's really thinking long term about his life, and he knows he wants to improve himself. What are some of your good qualities that you want to increase and use to benefit others? I'm a certified yoga teacher, a certified combat lifesaver, a certified emergency medical responder. I have fought against ISIS on the front lines and focused on saving wounded comrades. I have saved 3 gunshot wound victims so far and treated many wounded people. Then he says, I practice meditation and am a very peaceful person when I am not under attack. So, of course, I thought, oh, well, when do I say, oh, I'm a kind person, I'm a friendly person, but not always live up to that, And it is me saying that I'm this kind of person? Is that me wanting to appear that way? Is that what I truly aspire for? So he continues, I believe in civil rights struggle, women's liberation, equality, decolonization, feeding people. I'm a decent vegetarian cook. Studying history and her story. And my friends tell me that I'm brave. I feel that I should use these qualities to go to places where most people are afraid to go and try to learn and help people there. Often people in these places I have been help me grow more than I help them. So it's really beautiful. And so many of these qualities, I think many of us would stand behind and say, yes, absolutely. And he has this, even his friends, are telling him that he has courage, that willingness to put himself physically in a vulnerable situation to save lives. Then he offers some self-reflection. I am self-aware enough to realize that I have a white knight hero complex, which needs to be offered as a self-criticism. I am also a left-wing extremist, and that may be more harmful than helpful. So, how much do we want to save the day? Do everything we possibly can to get people to change immediately? Do we hold our views to the extreme and push them on people and, try to get our way at any cost? And then there's another question. What are particular aspects of your thinking or behavior that you would like to understand and change in your life? I need to control my tongue and keep my most colorful political ideas to myself and examine my political convictions for flaws and unwholesome pitfalls. So we need to do this too. Yeah, it's really, I think, looking for internal inconsistencies in our thinking, saying one thing, doing something else, all of these things where we're just influenced by so much, and so that we get confused. He continues, I'm an anarchist in the sense that we reject totalitarian forms of authority and actively work to build community support groups of solidarity, food cultivation and distribution, medical aid, self-defense, self-governance, feminism, women's crisis centers and support groups, supporting abused women, direct democracy, social ecology, and environmentalism. Right? So many of these views, we would say, yes, absolutely. So he continues, and this is where he really opens up and is very transparent. I am in prison because I organized an armed defense to protect our community from armed Trump supporters who attempted an armed fascist coup on January 6th in DC. I made a Facebook event and posted flyers online. So I got 2 charges of transmitting interstate threats to kidnap and injure a person. I tend to say ridiculous things online, and that has to stop. So what he said has changed his life forever. And he recognizes that, So on January 12th and on January 14th, he posted statements online asking people to come and fight against the armed racist mobs with Confederate flags. So on January 15th, he was arrested by FBI agents. There was a trial and he was sentenced. But on January 20th, which is the inauguration where he was responding to that, he was worried that these armed racist mobs would come to the Florida Capitol. There were no violent protests. But now, because of what he said, he's in prison for up to 5 years. So I wanted to give another perspective on his life as well. There was a New York Times article, former infantryman is convicted of threatening right-wing protesters. So he enlisted in the Army as an airborne infantryman in 2006. He received an other than honorable discharge. From 2008 to 2017, he was homeless and mostly unemployed and worked occasionally as a security guard. It really puts a different spin on how we see him, I think. In 2017, he was fighting in Syria with a group designated by the US government to be a terrorist group. And he returned to the United States in 2019. So I think it's really important to share these details because it shows that he is so complex. He's been influenced by all these different people, all these different factors. And I was thinking, we are influenced by so much, by people we meet in person, friends, family, coworkers, but also the internet. So much of how we're influenced comes from social media, from the news. And so it's really helpful, I think, to look at how do my views fit together as a cohesive whole. Do they fit together, or are they contradictory? And as I've been thinking about this for many days, and what I keep coming back to is this notion of my group. Who's in my group? Who's on my side? And so, I was thinking like, yeah, Daniel and I share so much in common. We have so many common views. And yet there's some that we obviously don't agree on. So is he in my group? Is he not in my group? And why is it that I focus in on one aspect of a person and not look at them as a whole? Why do I cling to that one and say, oh, well, because of that, they're not in my group? Or because of that, they are in my group. So it's very subjective. And I would just like to ask you, when did you start to categorize Daniel as other? Was it as soon as you found out he was an inmate? Was it when he started to say things that you disagreed with? Or maybe he's on your side because you share the same values, or at least most of them. And then in that case, who isn't on your side in this story? There's the US government, the FBI agents. They could have arrested other people too. Is it the terrorist organization that he got involved in? Was it those people that influenced him? He was just trying to be helpful and they influenced him in a negative way. So really to try to pick apart who's the enemy here. And I obviously from a Buddhist perspective, we say the enemy is the harmful intentions, the wrong views, all of those things that are propelling everybody from all sides to want to harm each other. And it really made me think about how there's this talk, and Venerable Chodron has said it many times, that people say, religious leaders shouldn't talk about politics, shouldn't talk about what's going on. We should stay focused on values, on ethics. Well, this story shows that, what's happening in society and these views affect people's lives in this way that where his life is totally changed now. So in really profound ways. So his arrest and sentence is another example of how much our words matter, and they can affect the rest of our lives. So it's not just about what we believe, but I really think this shows it's how we seek to promote that change. Thank you.